Hey everybody, tonight's video is called Reunited and it feels so good. I'm just kidding, peaches and herbs right there. But tonight we're going to continue our pass-through study here in the book of Song of Solomon, where we're going to see Solomon and his wife after a dispute type situation between them. They're going to be reunited in love. And for those who are married, if you've had a marital disagreement, a dispute, spit spat, whatever you want to call it, it always feels great when you both can reunite. And we're going to see how it feels for them in today's chapter. So we'll start out chapter 6, verse 1. It says, "Where has your beloved gone, O fairest among women? Where has your beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with you?" So having established why they should look, the daughters asked a second question to the beloved wife, where to look. In verse 2 and 3, it says, "My beloved has gone to his garden, to the bed of spices, to feed his flock in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies." So she believed that Solomon went back to the garden and reaffirmed her exclusive love. In verse 4 through 7, it says, "O my love, you are so beautiful as Tirzah, lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. Turn your eyes away from me, for they have overcome me. Your hair, Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep which come up from the washing. Everyone bears twins, and none is barren among them. Like a piece of pomegranate are your temples behind your veil." So we see from here through chapter 8, verse 4, they're going to work through their difficulties and rekindle their love. And the nation's capital city was known as a perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth. And Tirzah was 6 miles northeast of Shechem in central Palestine, and it was a setting of a great natural beauty. And it was the capital of the breakaway northern kingdom for approximately 50 years after Solomon's death. And it was destroyed in the 7th century BC, as seen in 1 Kings and 2 Kings. And the beloved calls her beautiful again, saying that she is as an oppressive as an army with banners that is ready for battle. And also wanted to point out that Tirzah was a city in the tribe of Ephraim back in Joshua 12:24. And note also that there is no bitterness, there's no unforgiveness on the part of the beloved. And one unpopular truth here, we see this was the lady's fault for once. And I know it's always the men's fault today, but in the Bible, in the book of Song of Solomon, she was the one that had her moment. So, yeah, in all honesty, the offended party was quick to forgive and restore the relationship. And that is what we need to be with our spouses. When there is an issue, we need to be able to forgive them, quickly and restore quickly. And he's once again making note of her eyes as beautiful. And as I mentioned before, Charles Spurgeon, he allegorized verse 5 as Christ overcoming with love when he looks upon the church. And while I agree with Charles Spurgeon on quite a bit of doctrines, the book of Song of Solomon, I'm not really in agreement with him, as the purpose of it. But, I don't consider that a major issue. But we see that the beloved once again also describes her as he did back in chapter 4, verse 1 through 5, with her hair being like a flock of goats. And if you tell me my hair is like a flock of goats, it's probably going to be offensive to me, not a compliment. And when they reunited, he repeats the same that he told her on their wedding night. And notice that he didn't describe her physical features again. He didn't mention in the passage here about her lips, her breasts, or hips. He's being romantic and not sexual in their reunion. In verse 8 through 10, it says, "There are 60 queens and 80 concubines, and virgins without number. My dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The daughters saw her and called her blessed. The queens and the concubines, and they praised her. Who is she who looks forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, awesome as an army with banners?" So he assures her of his love. He reaches new heights in telling her that she remains the best of the best in his eyes. In verse 8, it's interesting. I wonder if these are his other women. But there's no language of ownership or relationship. And the numerical progression from 60 to 80 to without number points to the use of various categories for effect only. And Solomon tells her that she stands above all women. And if you didn't know, concubine is the wife of a secondary status in the Bible. And verse 10 is best understood as being said, the daughters of Jerusalem, as the third question in the series of 3. And this time they exalt the Shulamite as one who ranks with the great beauties of God's creation. And she describes in language alike of an ancient Near East goddess with dawn, moon, and sun. And men, this is for us. It's important that our wives not only feel beautiful, but preferred above others in the eyes of her husband. Everybody should know that the number one woman that you want is your wife. And verse 9 doesn't necessarily mean that she was an only child, but that she was a highly favored or a preferred child by her mother. In verse 11 and 12, to wrap up, or actually we got one more verse after. 11 and 12, though, it says, "I went down to the garden of nuts to see the verdure of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded and the pomegranates had bloomed. Before I was even aware, my soul had made me as the chariots of my noble people." So this is best understood when spoken by the beloved. And Solomon acknowledges that when he left home hastily, he returned to agricultural and military matters. And orchard is the feminine form of the same word translated garden in the last chapter, verse 1. She went to see and enjoy the coming of spring. And springtime was associated at this time period with the presence of love and goodness of their love, as we saw back in Song of Solomon chapter 2, verse 10 through 13. And so their relationship was in what you could describe as springtime again. And for me, spring is, I think, my third favorite season in ranking. Fall is my favorite, summer is my second favorite, and then springtime, hits after that. And the reason why I like fall better is because I like the change of leaves and the just the time of year. You get the holidays approaching, all that. But we see that in the springtime, seeing the flowers bloom, the grass go green, and the leaves budding, it is an amazing feeling, especially when you live up in the north of the United States, or if you live somewhere else where you get pretty bad winters, or even snow if you don't like snow. In verse 13, to finish the chapter here, it says, "Return, return, O Shulamite, return, that we may look upon you. What would you see in the Shulamite? As it were, the dance of the two camps." So verse 13, in my argument, represents the most difficult portion to interpret in the entire song. And as in verse 11 and 12, this is best understood by the daughters of Jerusalem. And in effect, they beckon the bride back to the royal palace. And the Shulamite, aka Shunammite, is a resident of Shunem, a part of the land allotted to Issachar back in Joshua 19:18. And what would you see is the beloved speaking? It refers to some kind of marital dance associated in the city of Mahanaim, which would be inappropriate for anyone other than Solomon to witness. And some, though, argue that it's a possibility from Song of Solomon chapter 5 verse 7 that the watchmen are observing. And we see tonight that the maiden described the restoration of their love relationship. And we see a further question from the daughters of Jerusalem. In verse 2 and 3, the maiden describes her relationship to her beloved man. In verse 4 to 7, we see the beloved describes the physical appearance of his maiden. And we see in reconciliation, he added compliments, reminding her of her favorability as she compared to others in, his life. And when we reconcile after disputes with our spouse, may we speak positive encouragement to them. May we not hold some sort of bitterness or, past, I call it the hook, where you have a hook, into their clothing, and you're going to remind them of what just happened 5-10 years from now. In verse 8 through 10, the beloved describes his maiden as compared to other women. In verse 11 and 12, the maiden describes her meeting with the beloved. And the goodness and depth of their relationship really had been restored. And problems of the past didn't mean that their future was doomed or even hindered. And couples should be confident in faith, knowing that God can restore, that God can bring springtime to our relationships that are troubled. And one thing I want to mention is never bring up the past against your spouse. If you get nothing out of today's video, I hope that really sticks to you, to never bring up something from the past to your spouse when another conflict arises. And that's a sign, really, when you're going to bring stuff up from the past all the time, that is a sign that you are holding on to a grudge and that you need to go to the Lord in repentance. And it shows that you haven't forgiven them. So the chapter ends with the daughters of Jerusalem appealing to the maiden and her responding. And we'll see you next as we look at Solomon describing the maiden's beauty in chapter 7 more. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening. God bless. We'll see you for the next study.